Hi students, it's Mr. Musselman here. A beautiful day in the Burlington neighborhood with some friends of mine here to talk to you about conservation. These friends are all from Burlington and we're going to share with you a wonderful piece of land right in the Burlington town lines that you can explore for yourself. Before we get going, I want to introduce you to some of these friends.
Hi, I'm Rachel Bigler.
Hi, I'm John Keeley from Burlington Conservation.
Hello, I'm John Sachs from Friends of Mary Cummings Park.
Hi, I'm Eileen Coleman. I'm also from Burlington Conservation.
And like I said, we're going to take a tour of Mary Cummings Park today with you. Mary Cummings Park is located on the border of the town of Burlington and the town of Woburn. It's home to many different habitats for wild plants and animals to make their homes in. Let's hear from our Burlington neighbor and member of the Friends of Mary Cummings Park organization, Mr. John Sachs, about the history of this location.
Mary Cummings Park has actually been here for a really long time. Mary Cummings donated the park so that there would be a nice place for people to come, but for complicated reasons, it was actually controlled by the city of Boston. And today, as of about 2 years ago, it's run by an organization called the Trustees of Reservations. And they came in here and they put in this beautiful picnic area and these picnic tables, and there's a wonderful boardwalk that I hope you get to go see, because you can go right out in the wetland, and if you're lucky, you can see some animals out there.
We're going to explore this conservation land together right now. The root word of the word conservation is conserve. What does that word mean to you? What does it mean to conserve? When have you heard the word conserve used before? Have you ever conserved something? How did you conserve it? Let's get exploring this conservation land right now. Like I said, my friends and I here are to talk to you today about conservation. The word conserve means to protect or preserve the resources that exist and we have available to ourselves and our world. As we'll find, conservation can mean a lot of different things in different places. One of the first places that you'll see when you come to Mary Cummings Park is the brand new pollinator garden in development. John, what's going on in our pollinator garden right now?
Well, one of the great things about Mary Cummings Park that a lot of places don't have is these big, beautiful open meadows with lots and lots of wildflowers. So cleared a lot of invasive brush here, and they've opened up the space so native plants can go crazy. And there's some right here now, but if you come here in the middle of the summer, this field is just full of wildflowers.
One way humans conserve natural habitats is by removing invasive species and replanting local or native plant species. An invasive species is a plant, animal, or other organism that causes harm to an environment that it is not native to. Explorers on the weekends are in for a treat at Mary Cummings Park. On nice days like this one, you're sure to see one or more of the members of the Burlington RC Flyers on the field maintained here in the park. The airfield at Mary Cummings Park is a place where wildlife and human life share a natural space together. Since the 1960s, humans have been conserving both the land and airspace above to fly model aircraft like these. Over time, remote-controlled aircraft have come to include helicopters and modern-day drones like the ones you see here. Working with the federal government that controls airspace to keep airplanes and aircraft safe during travel, our community has conserved the airspace directly above this airfield so that model airplane users like those seen in this video and those you might see on the weekend can use this space safely without concern of possibly causing an accident with commercial aircraft, like the ones you might use when taking a trip. In between our locations, Mary Cummings Park has all sorts of really cool trails with lots of tree cover and trails that are both rough and rugged and easy for people with all accessibility needs to travel. They're also quite noisy, at least when it comes to nature. While we walk, I want to introduce you again to my friend Rachel Bigler. Rachel, what does conservation mean to you, and how do you live conservation in your life every day?
Yeah, so to me, it means helping keep the earth and the ground around us clean and free from trash. So there's a couple terms that I want to introduce you to. They're plogging, plocking, and plaking. You might ask what those mean. So there's a Swedish term from our friends the Swedes called plocka upp, which means pick up, and you mash that up with the words jogging, walking, and biking. And so you get plogging, plocking, and plaking. And what you do is while you're out for a walk like this, you look around at the ground beneath you and you see what doesn't belong, right? Where's the trash? So you find the trash and you pick it up and you take it with you and you put it in a trash barrel.
Wow, so Rachel, if I'm hearing you correctly, I'm hearing that when it comes to conservation, it's about actively thinking about the environment around you and thinking about what does and doesn't belong there and how you can keep that space beautiful.
Exactly.
To conserve also means removing man-made materials that are harmful or do not belong in a natural environment. Let's keep an eye out with Rachel for things that are man-made and do not belong at Mary Cummings Park as we continue our hike. We're now standing at one of the coolest new features of Mary Cummings Park, and I'm standing here with my friend Eileen Coleman from the Burlington Conservation to talk a little bit about what this space is and how you can enjoy it. Eileen?
Thanks, Mr. Musselman. So this is a boardwalk that was built by the trustees for Mary Cummings Park. So what conservation, the department does and the Conservation Commission do is we protect open spaces in Burlington, and in particular we work for the protection of wetlands. So this boardwalk that's behind me actually extends out into a wetland, which is a very important feature because wetlands, they support particular animals and plants, and they store floodwaters. So these are a couple of their very important functions. So the trustees wanted to build the boardwalk right into the wetland, which this is where the Conservation Commission had to compromise a little bit because we felt that the impact on the wetland was outweighed by the educational value that this boardwalk is going to give.
Eileen, what can we learn by standing out here on the boardwalk?
So this boardwalk is an excellent place. It gives a fantastic vantage point to look at the wetlands in Burlington. You can observe a lot of species that are in there depending on the time of year. You'll see a lot of cattails and a lot of other beautiful plant species. Mr. Musselman is hoping that we're going to see a blue heron, but that's maybe a bit unlikely today. You can observe frogs, lots of bird life.
Because we can't be experts at everything, Mrs. Coleman suggested that we ask our friends about some of the different species that live here in the wetlands. John, what do you know about the creatures and plants that live here?
Okay, there's a lot of different bird species. If you just listen, you can hear yellow warblers and see the witchetty witchetty witchy is a common yellowthroat.
Listen again for the witchetty witchetty witchy song pattern a common yellowthroat makes.
See the witchetty witchetty witchy is a common yellowthroat. We just saw a turkey vulture flying over. There's goldfinches flying over. There's red-winged blackbirds. There's actually a cool bird called a Virginia rail, which I've heard calling in here, which is just lives in marshes. Blue herons will land in here. Wood ducks and mallards. For animals, you would have mink. You would have muskrats, beavers, raccoons. Deer around the edges. Well, actually, no, I've seen deer running right through the middle of it, actually.
Wow.
It looks so deep, John. I can't imagine a deer running through this wetland space. How would that work?
So it's not really that deep, although the mud is probably fairly deep. But the vegetation out here is a real lure for them. As these grasses emerge in the spring, they're just really tasty. After a winter of eating nothing but dry twigs, when this green stuff starts sprouting in the spring, it's heaven for them.
And John, as I mentioned before, you're a friend of Mary Cummings Park. When you come down to the boardwalk, is there anything that you like to look for yourself that's really special, or your favorite, if you will?
Well, for me, just to look around and think that this amazing piece of wetland and wild area inside the 128 Route 95 belt, and yet all the way around you could see no buildings, and that's very magical to me.
We can conserve by building around natural spaces so that wildlife can stay wild and away from roads, lights, and human development and activity.
And yes, you can hear the frogs. And I did see a little muskrat swimming in the creek. For me, pretty much a trip to Mary Cummings Park is not really complete without a visit to the boardwalk to see what's happening out here.
While we were heading off the boardwalk, I saw a very curious sign about wildlife replication. And I thought Eileen might be able to tell us a little bit about what wildlife replication means and why it's right here next to our boardwalk. Eileen, what can you tell us?
Well, we were talking earlier about how the trustees had to get permission to build this boardwalk in a wetland area. Part of what they agreed to do was to provide a replication area. That means that they built a whole new wetland here beside the boardwalk to kind of make up for some of the impacts that they had done by constructing it. So they brought in, they dug it out and they brought in the wetland soil and they planted.
To replicate is to make a copy of or to reproduce. In this case, we're reproducing or making a copy of wetland habitat. Another way humans conserve is by replicating or making copies of habitat that is damaged or destroyed by human activity or development. Eileen, I'm seeing these funny looking, almost like straw cylinders on the ground. I'm wondering what you can tell me about those.
That's exactly what they are. They're called wattles. They're straw wattles, and they are meant to prevent soil and sediment from eroding off this replication site and into the wetlands. So you'll also see them alongside the new trails, so as to prevent the sediment running off the new trails and messing up any of the habitat that's already in existence that we didn't want.
We can conserve by preventing further damage to the environment with the help of man-made structures and technology, like these wattles. You know, it's really amazing how much work goes into conserving such an important piece of wilderness like our wetlands. It's obvious to me that groups like the Conservation Committee and the trustees, they really work hard to do a thoughtful job of protecting our natural wildlife.
That's true. Most developers are very good about working together with the Conservation Commission to protect wildlife and to protect the habitat that's around them.
Let's continue on our loop through Mary Cummings Park. On our way back to the parking lot in Mary Cummings Park, we found a curious piece of material that probably doesn't belong in this area. Do you see it? What looks out of place on our conservation land's forest floor?
I do. It's right there.
Rachel, let's take a look at what this is. Oh my goodness.
Whoa.
It's a can, but it's not like a can top or a can that I've seen in a long time.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is, Rachel?
I think that has been around for a while, and manufactured material like this doesn't decompose into our environment, but rather it just sits there in the ground and maybe even gets a little dirt covered over it and buried into the ground.
What would you do with this man-made material to conserve this environment?
So when you spot something like that, you want to pick it up. And if you're thinking, oh, someone else had their germs on it, the germs are long gone by now. But there's another option. You can always wear gloves and pick it up while wearing gloves so that you don't even have to worry about whether it's 20 years old or a day old.
You know, I think you know a little something about those gloves and some other tools that a special organization that's popping up in our community is sharing with community members like you.
Yeah, so if you can see my shirt, it's from Keep Mass Beautiful. It's a nonprofit organization, which means they're not trying to make any money. And we have a chapter right here in Burlington that you can be part of. You can join the Mass Litter Crew cleanup crew, and you can get a pair of gloves and a shirt and a reusable bag and also a grabber tool, so you don't even have to get down in the dirt like we are right now.
That's super cool, Rachel. I can't wait to sign up for that organization. Meanwhile, I think I'll take this pretty old can here and bring it to one of the recycling bins or the trash cans that are out at the entrance of Mary Cummings Park. Let's hang on and continue our journey. Remember, we can conserve by removing man-made materials that don't belong in the natural environment. We're on our way back to the parking lot, and we're passing through the pollinator garden once again. Now, when I look at this garden and I think about a pollinator garden, it doesn't look like the pollinator gardens that I'm familiar with in maybe my neighbor's backyard. John, tell me what's going on. Why is it that I don't see all those many different colors that I might see from the garden shop?
Okay, so there's a couple of different things going on here. This is brand new, and because of the size of it, they didn't go out and buy plants. They planted seeds, and a lot of wildflowers are either biennial or perennial. Biennial means they may only flower on their second year. The perennials will flower every year, but it might take them a couple of years before they flower. So this perennial garden will probably take a couple of years before it's really at its peak.
I see. So, like a lot of things in nature, John, you know, it doesn't just all happen at once, right? It takes time to grow and change over time.
It does. And flowers plants flower at different times of the year. So there's spring wildflowers, but there's flowers that'll every month through the summer and fall. There's different plants that are flowering.
Oh wow! So you're telling me that I can come back here maybe at a different time here in the late spring and early summer, and this pollinator garden might look a little different than it does now?
Absolutely.
That's really cool. I'm excited to explore this more all year long. I hope you are too. Let's get back and wrap up what we've learned today. Whew! I don't know about you, but I had a wonderful time exploring Mary Cummings Park today. What did you learn from our conversation about the word conserve and conservation? I love that you're thinking about the different ways that we humans can have an impact on our environment in a positive way. It's important for us to take care of the wildlife and the plants and the animals that make their homes all around our neighborhoods, our community, and this world that we live in. I want to put out a special thanks to the friends that joined me on our trip today. Photographer and member of the Friends of Mary Cummings Park, Mr. John Sachs, Burlington Conservation Administrators John Keeley and Eileen Coleman, and Burlington resident and chair of the new Keep Massachusetts Beautiful Burlington chapter, Mrs. Rachel Bigler. Thanks also to our friends at BCAT TV and to the Burlington Remote Control Flyers for sharing their video with us. Until next time, stay curious and stay wild.